Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Modern Market. This is our daily show from Monday to Friday about the NFT market. We go live every single day, 7 a.m. Eastern Time, 12 p.m. BST, where we discuss all things to do with the modern market. That is the crypto market, the NFT market, and how to make some and or a lot of money on the internet. I'm your host, B-Check. I'm joined by my legendary co-host, Legendary and Sammy. And today we have a very special guest with us. We have none other than Kodama, full-time DGen since 2016, angel investor, JPEG collector, and professional critic of Cryptopunks and fine digital JPEGs. Great to have you with us on the show today, Kodama. How are you doing? How are you feeling, my man?
GM, thanks for the invitation. Well, I'm feeling not so good today because my PFP is only worth 150K anymore. So, and people suddenly all seem to care about it. But yeah, besides that, fortunately, there is the Eth God Candle. So yeah, I'm feeling quite well.
Mixed feelings then. Mixed feelings.
Mixed feelings. Yeah.
Six-figure PFP, not so good. Eth God Candle, good on the other hand. Good stuff. So we're going to, those are clearly the two main headlines today. We're going to get into all of that and more in just a little bit, of course. Just want to check in with the others as always. Legendary, how are you doing, my man? It's Tuesday, it's the 21st of May. Market came alive yesterday, right? In different ways.
Market came alive, celebrating the God Candle, picking out the green velvet polo shirt to celebrate exactly that. Obviously, super happy with my admittedly lucky bet on Polymarket. Placed that in March. One day after Brett, who's speaking with us today, had posted about that mispriced opportunity and have been holding that bet open until yesterday, where I did close a good amount of that and basically doubled up on the ETH ETF approval bet that Polymarket had offered.
That's a nice one to be able to screenshot and share like 1 or 2 weeks later. That's a very, very nice one.
Yeah, looked pretty good.
Feeling good about that for sure. Sammy, how you doing, my man? Coming back onto the show to a pretty positive sentiment, don't you think?
It's great, yeah. It's great to be back. I think having that weekend off enabled me to revitalize, and yeah, I think coming back today, just seeing the market the way it is, gets me bullish again. So keen to get into it.
Good stuff. So just so people know where we're going on the show today, as always, we're going to hit the snapshot in a sec to get you all the headlines and price action updates. Then we're going to do a bit of chit chat on the market in general, price action stuff, what we're looking at, what's up, what's down, because obviously on very volatile days, like a lot of stuff happens and people look to make very specific moves, trying to catch some of that volatility. So we'll take a look at that. And then we're going to get into the main headlines of the today. Obviously, ETH moving very, very aggressively up, as well as the Cryptopunks bigger discussion. So we're going to have all of that in just a little bit. As always, let's hit the snapshot first, which is pinned up top. If you do find it brings you some value today, please do give it a like. So let's get into it. Starting with some price action. We've got Bitcoin up 6%, breaking 70K again, up to 70.9K. It might be a little bit higher now than that from when I first wrote this. ETH is up, pushing 20%. I believe it's just above 3.7K now. And Solana is up 2%. First headline, obviously, ETH rips 20% to 3.7K on rumors of significantly improved chance of ETH ETF approval. A few key statistics trying to bring together like the various important bits of information people were sharing yesterday and stats and opinions. Fubar shared that this was the largest ETH USD daily candle in history. It went from 3,070 to 3,661 yesterday, which is a pretty huge move. Cup of Joseph shared that ETH just added half of Solana's market cap in 3 minutes. I don't know if that's like 100% perfectly accurate, but I thought that's a pretty interesting statistic. Some further details on the kind of ETH ETF news. The SEC asked exchanges to accelerate the filings on an accelerated basis for the ETF. The development is significant as it reflects the SEC's interest in potentially approving a spot ETH ETF sooner rather than later. Eric Balkunas, our favorite ETF reporter from Bloomberg, tweeted this, and I believe this is one of the things that started this move. He tweeted that there was an update. James Safe and he were increasing our odds of a spot Ether ETF approval to 75%, up from 25%, which is way lower, hearing chatter this afternoon that the SEC could be doing a 180 on this increasingly political issue. So now everyone is scrambling like us. Everyone else assumed they'd be denied. So a huge gap up in terms of their percentage success attached to the ETH ETF approval, up from 25% to 75% in their opinion now, based on what they're hearing. And then just some opinion from Perma ETH Bull DC investor that I thought was interesting because people would want some perspective there. He said, a lot of you mid-curve the BTC ETF massively, and you will do the exact same thing with the ETH ETF. We are about to start the true retail bull market with reflexive frenzy likely, and these are the only two assets with gargantuan ETF inflows possible from IRAs and crypto retail who doesn't want a crypto exchange account. And one is a third of the size and has minimal daily issuance dump with an asset which regularly gets locked up in staking, DeFi contracts, etc. Going to get into all of that and more. There's a lot to unpack bit by bit. We'll talk about the events. We'll talk about the consequences in just a little bit. Second main headline, of course, is Cryptopunks collaboration with Nina Chanel received poorly, forcing Yuga to change distribution to Nina's holders only. This was the news that Superpunk World, a 500-piece collection that is, in their words, as playful as it is profound for our punk residents collaboration, was coming to market. I believe it was meant to come to market today, and it was going to be open to all collectors, but I believe now they've changed the distribution. We're going to discuss like the two sides of the argument there, and Kodama as a CryptoPunk holder, we will definitely be interested to hear his thoughts. Getting into some other price action from around the space, because still important there. CryptoPunks down 10%, with the floor going down to 36 ETH from what I could see. Some other sales a little bit lower. Bored Apes down 5% to 12.8 ETH. Mutants at 2.3, down 9%. DGods at 1.6. Captains up 7%, interestingly, to 3.3. Azuki's at 5, Penguins at 11.5, pretty steady. Mad Lads not moving at 65 Solana, and the Nouns winning bid was at 6.8 ETH. And some notable sales: CryptoPunk Purple Hair, usually which would probably have a bit of a premium, sold at the floor at 38.5 ETH. And Choose Rich Nick, within about 2 minutes of the announcements, didn't floor, but sold his VR CryptoPunk for 42 ETH, which was actually flipped in a few hours for 52 ETH. So left 10 ETH on the table. Pretty notable sale, notable flip there. But that is the price action. Those are the headlines. Legendary, there's a lot to unpack there. We're going to get into all of it as part of the main body of the show in just a little bit. But is there anything that's catching your eye, catching your attention on a day like today, which is a very volatile day in the market?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, obviously not going to touch on the Punk's floor price just right now, but if we take a look at the Mintify heat map, there is actually something interesting going on. If you look at both Milady's as well as Remilio, we see that both of them are up more than 30%. Milady's being up 35.4%, Remilio's 33.6%. And with that being said, 5.5 ETH. With that being said, Milady's have flipped Azuki with actually quite some distance, because Milady floor price at 5.5 ETH and Azuki's are at 4.99.
Wow. That is an aggressive move up.
Just against obviously a massive pump on ETH, and the rest of the market, Sappy Seals and other collections being down quite a fair bit, which makes that move up, that leg up, even more impressive in my opinion. Yeah, and as maybe beta to Milady's, Remilio's have also gone up 30-something% to 1.8 ETH. Just crazy demand. They always seem to be like counter cyclical. Whenever everything else is struggling, they go up aggressively. Whenever everything else does well, they kind of hold or go down. Very interesting to note there. Sammy, what are your thoughts? Anything catching your attention in terms of the big market moves?
Yeah, so exactly the same thing. I do think I have a bit of a thesis though, and I'm looking at some of the other ones that are pumping a little bit as well. You look at Captains, you look at Pudgy, you look at Milady's and Remilio's, and I think we talk about maybe a capital rotation out of this, like the fear of punks no longer becoming this standalone collection. Maybe some of these holders are kind of exiting. So it'd be interesting to see the data, to see the flow from there. And I know on Inspect you can do that. So maybe looking at the punks, seeing where those people have kind of changed their PFPs to. That could potentially be something, but also just leaning into that fair launch idea. You know, we spoke about Kobe's Substack yesterday, I think it was. I do think that you've got collections that aren't necessarily owned by anyone or run by anyone. So the Remelios, the Miladies, it's like, okay, well, which collections do we go into? Which ones do we trust? Where it is literally just based off vibes and there is literally no promises. So I do wonder whether that is the case, where it's like, okay, well, this is the news on the timeline. This is a narrative. Let's go into something that actually is just, I don't know, almost more decentralized than some of these other projects. So that's my own personal thesis. Whether it's true or not, I don't know. I need to verify it, but it's just interesting to see or observe that. But yeah, keen to hear your thoughts.
Very interesting. I would personally be shocked if people were selling CryptoPunks in order to enter into anything else. Like, I would be thinking if they were going to be exiting, it's just like get hold of that sweet ETH at the time when it's going through the roof. That would be my personal thought. Interesting you brought up captains though, because that feels like an odd one to be moving at this particular point in time, particularly when I've seen them and Mockaverse be compared so often. Because people view the Mockaverse NFT as obviously about to get an airdrop as part of that distribution of the Mocka token, as well as probably like an ongoing airdrop. So it's kind of like an NFT filled with a bunch of tokens in. But Mockaverse has obviously been going down quite a lot in the last few days, and it's down another few percent from yesterday. Whereas Captain seems to be going in the other direction. I don't know why that might be, but very, very interesting to note that. Go on, Sammy.
I think it's also worth just keeping an eye on, because the whole shitcoin summer could end up playing out, and I think Blast is a good thesis for it. I think Friendtech is a good thesis for it. So I'm keeping an eye on these Friendtech clubs. I know Remelios have their own club, so Room 50. That one has jumped about 10%. There's not much actually activity going on in there in terms of like stuff that you'd kind of expect. Most people are just posting Remelio. But shitcoin summer, so Heroes Club is pretty interesting. They've already airdropped us probably close to $1,000 worth of value to holders at the moment. So I do think that we're kind of seeing this narrative play out where the Remelios, the Miladies, like that kind of, I don't know, segment of the market is starting to be like, okay, well, where's the returns? Like, where can we position ourselves? So it's just interesting to see that as well.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. Something's going on with those clubs. I'm not entirely over it, but it's good to know that you are in the trenches there. Kodama, let's hit you up here before we get into the main stuff. Anything catching your attention in terms of the actual market moves in the last 24 hours, or just in general, anything kind of catching your attention?
I just saw one tweet from my friend BBA, and he said, what's happening with crypto right now shows that absolutely no one has any idea what they're talking about. And I read that and I thought, man, he's absolutely right, because it's, for me, it's what really amazes me is that a tweet by, or maybe it was more than just a tweet by the Bloomberg analyst, like increasing the odds, and suddenly ETH moves up 18%. I mean,
Wild.
This is, I don't understand how this even works. I mean, how can you pump the second largest coin in crypto by 18% within less than 24 hours by chatter? I mean, the guy tweeted, the reputable analyst posted, they heard some hearing chatter this afternoon. So I mean, this is what really, is mind-boggling to me right now. And then I saw BBA's tweet and I thought, yeah, nobody has any clue what's going on. And I would say the same about why Miladies and Remelios are pumping. Yeah, maybe it's because of the clubs, or maybe it's just because everything is completely random in crypto. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's I'm just getting you back on stage. It really looks like you dropped off on the Twitter side of things. Yeah, to your point, I've often thought now that actually the broader NFT market itself is just in the hands of this kind of invisible hand of the farmers, where sometimes it goes up, sometimes it goes down. It's not always obvious why. I take your point there. And then I guess it's worth just pivoting straight into the headlines that you mentioned, to be honest. How it was possible for these Bloomberg analysts, who were incredibly wrong last time, to then come around this time and say that that the chances have changed significantly, up from 25% to 75% for an ETH approval. And now the market is, I guess, beginning to price that in, whereas I think it was certainly not priced in before. Legendary, do you want to kind of take this point, maybe set us up for a conversation on the potential ETH approval news?
Yes, absolutely. So I think if we take a step back from that and go back to the pre-BTC ETF approval era, we've seen a lot of discussion around that. We've seen a lot of odds being thrown out, and Eric Balchunas was definitely the analyst who has established himself as that person who everyone's listening to, and what they say, what odds he has to share, the odds that everyone is taking. And he's been taking a pretty negative stance towards the chances of the ETH ETF approval after the BTC ETF has passed, which is something that some players like DC Investor have criticized and have said that he, again, that's DC saying, I'm just trying to paint a broader picture here,
Sure.
that he might be following his own agenda on that. And that is not really reflective of what's going on. But it seemed to be the general consensus that ETH ETF approval will happen, but definitely not by the end of May. And that the thing that changed yesterday is exactly what also Kodama was talking about, that suddenly rumors have been getting stronger, that there might be an ETH ETF coming sooner than expected, that the SEC has asked to prepare for an expedited approval and prepare for that exchange ETF listing. And this has led, essentially, if you go back 2 days, 3 days, where ETF approval chances were at 10% on Polymarket, has led to them increasing from 10% on Polymarket to 75-ish. And for Eric Balchunas' personal case, from 25 to 75%. Quick personal thought on that, and kind of adding to what Kodama has just said before, is I think it's not only in crypto, but maybe in crypto specifically, that a lot of people don't have their own opinion. And it's so we are looking like for those leading figures, whether that's Kobe, GCR, Ansem, and whatever they say, their word is law. And if Eric Balchunas is saying 25% chance of approval, this is what we're doing. And if he says it's 75%, then this is what we're thinking, because it's easier to listen to someone else's opinion than come up with your own genuine thinking. But again, not only true for crypto, generally something I think we can observe in society.
Yeah, I think that's definitely true. One small point on that, which I'm sure many people might have missed, playing into the exact same thing that you said, probably shouldn't attach too much weight to it. But you know how Kobe doesn't tweet that much anymore? He's like mostly replying. In one of his replies the other day, like hidden in like the second paragraph, he said something like, ETH is by far my largest holding. And I was like, yes. But no, and like, you know how when things is not in their main tweet, people like will it's far less likely that they're going to see it. But that was literally like 2 days ago, so that was fun to see. I wanted to maybe just touch on some of the more facts that we know before we get into that bigger discussion on DC's kind of criticism, and maybe then have a discussion on like what the implications are to the extent that we can try to figure that kind of stuff out. And potentially what kind of plays are more inbound, or what the types of consequences are. So as you said, there was this chatter, they've moved up the chances. We then had this secondary tweet. I'm just going to take people through a few tweets. I'm going to share this on the screen. We're live on video on X, live on video on YouTube too, for the people who don't know. So he also shared the Ethernet stakes is pretty good. Nice look at all the entrants dealing with this fire drill. Hearing the SEC wants a revised forms returned to them by 10 a.m. today, based on a bunch of comments they've received so far, for likely approval as soon as Wednesday. So I thought the deadline day was 23rd, which is in 2 days' time, which is Thursday, but it appears from Eric Balchunas at least that they could be potentially considering approval as soon as tomorrow. A couple of more details. Thanks, Sammy, for sharing this with me. This is, I think it's just a list of the people who have applied to provide ETFs.
I think that was in the previous quote tweet as well.
Got it.
So if you, yeah.
Okay, so that's just there. And then interestingly, we have this tweet which Autism Capital kind of summarized the situation, and Eric Balchunas actually replied with pretty much as a kind of simplistic, comedic summary of the situation. They said this: the SEC kicks the can down the road, endless revisions, endless hoops, endless meetings, no crypto company can comply enough. Trump says, lol, NFTs are lit. Smart money says maybe we don't need to vote blue. Biden shits his pants, makes a call. SEC says, give us 2 days. Eric Balchunas replies, pretty much. Kodama, do you have any view on this maybe slightly comical take on the situation? Obviously, it's a little bit political too. To what extent do you think this is maybe a little bit political in that sense? What do you make of that kind of simplistic summary?
Well, I feel definitely, I mean, it's the US elections are upcoming, so it's definitely political. Mr. Gensler, I don't know actually if he can be real, how it works with putting him into the same position again and when his period ends, but I don't know, assuming he wants to continue his job, he most certainly wants to please the upcoming president. Potentially, Trump has better chances to be elected than Sleepy Joe, not being political here. And yeah, but also I think the whole agenda with crypto and the SEC is political since years. They have been mocking crypto, making a fool of basically every player in the market, you know, giving green light to Kraken and then attacking them again. Same with Coinbase. And yeah, so political decisions are 100% heavily involved in all of this, in my opinion. But I mainly live in my crypto bubble, and I'm not very knowledgeable, especially when it comes, but I'm sure it plays a substantial role here.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. As you say, inherently political, anything to do with such incredible value or potential value is going to be incredibly important for people. Sammy, wanted to bring you in here. What are your thoughts on this particular issue? Do you think it means, do you think this is like a step change from the political organization? Do you think it's just the inevitable approval? What do you think of this kind of ramping up of the approval process?
I mean, so just in terms of like timelines and stuff, or specifically, is there something else you want me to comment on? Because I think from my view, like I'm surprised about the approval ratings. I don't know if you are, but like to go to a 75% chance of approval is one thing. But I think the SEC just has a vested interest in kicking the can down the road, because ultimately you only get one shot of letting the cat out of the bag. So it's interesting to me that if they do end up going through the motions of approving it this time round, it's very hard to then make revisions after the fact. So I think yeah, the politics and stuff aside, I do think that from an accounting perspective, so looking at my background, there's different percentages that are assigned to possible, likely, and probable. So the likely one is, well, possible is 25%. Likely is the range between the possible and the probable, and probable is effectively 75% or more. Now that varies from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. And I think that's how Eric has come up with that percentage. It's like, okay, well, it's probably probable now, therefore that's when that is likely to be approved. Whether it is or not, that's like, it could still be probable, but it might still not happen. And ultimately it's up to the SEC, because I do think that they only get one shot. And what's the harm in kicking the can down the road? Because people aren't going to be that upset, because that was the built-in expectation previously. And yes, ETH might take a hit, but ultimately I think it's going to be approved at some point. It's just with what revisions and what nuances that they put in. But yeah, it's hard to say, even after what like they've come out with as the analyst predictions. I just don't know what to think. So I'm kind of aligning my expectations with maybe not quite what the market is doing, but just kind of coming in, carrying on doing what I'm doing. So I have the mindset of when it comes out, and at least I'm managing those expectations. Because I think the market seems quite euphoric at the moment.
Yeah. Okay, I think that makes sense. Legendary, you just said that there is news coming out with respect to staking, because I remember some time ago, I think a bunch of the ETF providers started to amend their filings to request that staking was included. What have you just found from the news on Fidelity?
Yes, obviously we just touched on the fact that the SEC was calling for the S1 registration statements, and Fidelity was the first to now do an amended version of that, which is now specifically stating that the ETH in the ETF won't be staked. So no staking for the ETH ETF from what it looks like right now. Some people have already been commenting on that and saying that is actually not a bad news, because if ETF providers are not staking their ETH, they won't take a controlling share in the ETH network, because obviously they would be very, very significant holders. So the first reaction to that seems to be quite positive.
Yeah, interesting. So yeah, just for people's additional context, the amended statement has removed all language about staking, including staking rewards. The previous prospectus had said the fund intended to stake a portion of its assets with a staking provider, which would have generated staking awards. This is from the block, by the way. This may be due to the SEC's concerns about staking cryptocurrencies. The SEC sued Coinbase in June 2023 for providing access to staking through its platform, claiming it was violating securities laws. So maybe it's an attempt to simplify the whole system. Just take that issue off the table, get the ETF in, don't worry about the staking elements, because we don't want to argue about that right here, right now. Interesting.
One thing I found surprising, but that's probably me not fully understanding the technicalities of the registration process of ETFs, is that the SEC had called for the 19B4s and not the S1 registration, which is basically one step further from my understanding. And Fidelity has filed for that. So it seems that we are moving along even faster. But that's, again, probably me failing to understand the part of the registration process.
Okay. Interesting stuff from the kind of administrative perspective, trying to figure out how this stuff is moving along. Obviously, as Kodama mentioned as well, we're not like American political or administrative experts. So we're just figuring this stuff out live and trying to exercise our own judgment, as we say at the top of the show. Okay, let's think on two final questions on this for me. The first one is about the trust in the media. Kodama kind of raised that question, like how is it possible that the Bloomberg analysts were incredibly wrong on this? And the second one may be more about what the implications are. So let's start with the first. Kodama, you kind of raised that question first. I wonder if you have any further reflections on that, which is, let's see this criticism from DC. DC was on fire yesterday, by the way. Obviously, if you don't know, DC Investor is one of, I think, an investor that a lot of people look up to in the space. He's increasingly an ETH bull. He's always sticking up for ETH, if people don't know already. He said this: the Bloomberg bros are going to get a bunch of shit now. And if they end up being wrong, to be honest, they 100% deserve it. It's very strong words from him. Trash journalist behavior from the start of this call. They spoke with consistent certainty and routinely packaged their views as FUD for BTC maxi engagement. Pathetic. Like, incredibly strong words from DC. Not, I would say, kind of atypical for him, to be honest. Usually, like, a bit more reserved, a bit more kind of maybe respectful about this stuff, but obviously felt strongly about this topic. Kodama, did you think, in terms of their coverage of the Bitcoin ETF versus their coverage of the ETH ETF, there was like a big difference? Do you think it was irresponsible journalism to some extent?
I think that's maybe a bit over-exaggerated. Maybe they just enjoy the great engagement they get from Web3, who knows? So they tried the bullish and the bearish coverage once, I don't know. But obviously, I mean, this is all I don't know if you even can call it journalism if it's based on odds and chatter you
Sure.
hear and everything. So it's a bit of, I mean, it's also live coverage on X. So it's not published in any, obviously it's quoted and then published by a lot of tier one media, but it's not like they officially published it as a Bloomberg article in the first place. So it's a bit, I feel it's a bit more their personal agenda that they are pushing. But yeah, I don't know. I personally don't don't put too much trust into traditional media, especially when it comes to crypto, because I'm sure everybody in the audience will recall a day where someone from your family sent you a bearish article on Bitcoin. My uncle, my mother, I got well, always the same, an email or a screenshot on WhatsApp. NFTs are dead. Bitcoin is shit. So and all the media, they are doing 180 turns all the time, constantly. So I would not count on any of their opinions because we are in the market, especially you guys, 24/7. So we are much more qualified to build our own opinion than any journalist that writes about 50 topics a week and is not a full-time Web3 degen. Obviously, they have a better understanding of how an ETF filing essentially works, but I think we still have a better understanding of the market in general, the sentiment, the value of BTC, of ETH. We know that those two assets are, at least in my opinion, complementary and not in competition to each other. And yeah, in my opinion, by the way, also Ethereum was heavily undervalued or is still undervalued. BTC already crushed, but at least broke the all-time high from the last cycle, Ethereum not. So it was just time for ETH to catch up a bit, but it's still impressive that a rumor or a tweet, but because it's still pumping. We're now already, we're almost at 3.8K, up 21% now.
Wow.
So yeah, this is we're pumping it, Sammy, pumping it straight to 4K, but we're still quite far from the last all-time high. Still 23% down. So yeah, as I said, maybe the summary is don't put too much trust into traditional media, but I would also not, put too much trust into Twitter KOLs as well. So it's not so easy, unfortunately.
Very, very true. Not an easy thing to deduce the perfect kind of analysis. That is for sure. One of the interesting things I guess you touched on, which people in crypto should be incredibly aware of, is the very fact that it's funny sometimes how in an industry which is typically quite inherently anti-establishment in some ways, when these particular media publications came up with their conclusions, it was very much taken, like put on a pedestal, like this is what the Bloomberg people said, this is what the Bloomberg people said, therefore that must be what is correct, despite the fact on 9 out of 10 other occasions in this space, people are quite like, heavily skeptical about both mainstream media, governmental kind of power, and like that whole kind of traditional nexus of power. So that is an interesting observation. And I guess I mean, I'm typically, I think I actually fell into that bracket this time as well, where I was like, well, they're the ones having the conversations nearby. They're the ones who are very, very familiar with that process. And it's just even a reminder to myself personally, like, damn, everyone can get caught offside here. And sometimes they definitely do not know as much as their experience and history might suggest that they do. Legendary, you came off mute. Did you want to come in there?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that we are biased to do this thing when someone is right about a prediction to just assume he's going to be right in the future. And we've done it with traders in crypto who, I don't know, have had one great call, and then we elevated them to God status, even if it was an insane trade. If you think about the amount of people who are trading here, someone will just have the best performance for a specific thing, for a specific cycle, but that doesn't necessarily mean that this person is capable of predicting what is going to happen in the next cycle. It's the same thing if you look at VC funds. Just because one fund was super early to invest into Facebook, now Meta, doesn't mean that they are gonna hit the next Facebook. It just meant that they were good with this one single deal. Yes, they might have an edge, but it's not necessarily the case. But we like to extrapolate that past prediction performance and say this is how the future is going to look like. And one more point on DC Investor. He had a very good post back in March saying the CFTC has cleared ETH to be a commodity. ETH has CME future. ETH has future-based ETFs. 4 or 5 more arguments like that. Gary can't politically afford another capricious enforcement action. He knows he can't win. And for that reason, for him, back in March, he said ETH ETF is a done deal, might be postponed, but no way it's not going to happen. Someone said back, yeah, but SEC is not really talking with the issuers. And he was like, A, that's not true. They did sit down a few times. And there was a CoinDesk article on that. And B, what is there to discuss? You have the legal precedent from the BTC ETF that has paved a lot of the road, and there's not so much to discuss about that. So he's been early on that position that ETH ETF has a realistic chance to happen sooner than later.
One comment from my side to add to that post. Please. Also, he wrote Fidelity yesterday, meaning it 18th of March, added staking income to their ETF. And he also said they are willing to give it up in negotiations with the SEC as a face-saving maneuver, allowing for approval. And basically, they just did that today.
Yeah, that was spot on.
Which is pretty cool from DC that he predicted the future. Let's hope now that it was really a face-saving maneuver for allowing approval. So pretty cool from DC, in my opinion.
Interesting. That is really, really interesting. To think about that. I hadn't thought of that, because remember at the time, everyone's reaction to adding staking was just, oh, great, we're going to be able to stake in it. Not thinking, well, maybe this is a chess move. Let's stick it in so that we can take it out, so that we can get the main thing in. I think that's the correct interpretation on that. Look, I've got one more big thing on this, but I see some hands raised. I don't know if we can get to all of them, because we also have to get to the CryptoPunks stuff. And I've just seen this now. So let's go to Bread first for some quick reflections on the broader, the big ETH move, the big ETH news, and then we'll see where we get to. Bread, what are your thoughts, my friend?
Yeah, I'll try to keep it quick. One, just comments on Eric and co and their general thoughts on the approval. I think honestly, like, I'm not a big conspiracy theorist, so in my mind, it's just honestly like they're new to crypto, right? They haven't been covering it for years, and they're following the same trend that a lot of people did early on with BTC versus Ethereum, where like in some of their comments, they're like they compared Ethereum and the ETF to like Nokia coming after Apple kind of thing. Like it's the second fiddle thing that no one's going to care about. Like BTC is premium, whatever, and like it is established in the ecosystem. But I think there is a broader appeal. You guys know my position on that with yield and everything else. Sure. So there's that. So I think it's just honestly them being new to the stuff and having that opinion formed that way, and over time that stuff will adjust. And then the second thing is Anthony Sassano, so Sassel does Daily Guay. He's actually been really, really early on this. That's the reason I started doing my post back in early March about the ETF being approved, because he followed the decision logically, because as Legendary pointed out, a lot of people tend to do the herd mentality thing and not think for themselves. And he's just like, all right, so like if you follow this thing through and you do, okay, everything's getting denied, you can say okay and accept there, or you can think of the next order effect after that and say, okay, what happens if they do deny it, and like what their grounds would be, what the next step would be. And it was like they were already getting legal battles pushed against them by several people from the industry. So lawsuits were coming for the SEC. They've been getting dunked on continuously. There is precedent, so they would have to come up with actual reasons for why they do that stuff. And like yes, it could have been denied. And I was actually starting to waver a little bit myself, thinking that we were just going to wait for the BlackRock thing and go sideways. But if you think of like the next order effects, the argument weakened a little bit.
Yeah, I think that's all fair. It's definitely going to be one of those things where, in hindsight, everything becomes super, super clear and super, super obvious to people. But as you say, whether it was now, whether it was later, it did feel like an inevitable occurrence. Final bit on this, I think, is more to think about what are the immediate consequences now. So ETH has ripped to, just looking at the chart, as you said, Kodama, it's looking absolutely beautiful, still pumping up almost at 3.8K now. But even more generally, right? Like Bitcoin is up 6% too, up above 71K now. Solana just up a couple of percent at 180. Sammy, maybe coming to you first here. Like, what's the implications of this? Are people? I saw this other tweet from DC, quote tweeting someone where he said, someone else had tweeted, biggest catalyst in ETH history, confirming its transition into an institutional asset that can be bought by global wealth. Crypto Twitter's reaction to this is, what alts do we buy as beta? Like, what are people going to be looking at now? Are people just going to go and buy ETH? Clearly it is being bought in great quantities, but is that where the focus is going to be? Is the whole kind of ETH market underneath going to experience something significant? What are you thinking?
Well, I think there's two things. I would probably use Bitcoin's accumulation by institutions as an example of how much is probably going to be accumulated for ETH. You can use that as a proxy. That would be my first point of call. So looking at how much of inflows into those ETFs has happened over X period of time, and you could probably do similar projections based on like available circulating supply, and then work out what the price impact is going to be. That would be like the logical thing to do. It's very hard to work out, will there be people who bought ETH really early on that end up selling into that institutional accumulation? I don't know. It's very hard to work out the ins and outs, but that would be one point of call. And as to the beta, I'd probably say, I mean, Solana is just like, it's just always been there as a potential ETF. You've had Van Eck previously talk about predictions of Solana going to upwards of 3K. But the best estimate around about that 1K mark. And to get to that point, you're probably going to have some sort of catalyst to get back in. So I mean, that strikes me as the obvious one. I see Kaleo talking about AVAX, but I just don't see the same value proposition as Solana at this point in time. I think they've had that 100 million cultural fund, so they're building some stuff over there, and they've got some interesting stuff. But I think the number one after ETH is probably going to be Solana, unless there's some sort of huge adverse event, black swan event that we don't see. So that's just my view.
Okay, that's fair. One key question I have, something I'm thinking out loud on, Legendary, maybe for you, ETH L2s, Blast, like given how much everyone's been concentrating on Blast the last period of time, NFT Stats' revisions for gold have kept going down, a few murmurings, a little bit of chatter on crypto Twitter that this should send the Blast goal estimations up. Do you think this has a positive effect on the rest of the ETH ecosystem?
I mean, if you look at Arbitrum and some of the L2 token prices, they actually have moved in line with the ETH pump. Arbitrum is up 24%, so actually even a bit more than the ETH pump. So I do think that this is good news for L2s. I think it's good news for upcoming L2s and kind of adding a bit of fuel to airdrop season. If ETH ETF goes through, ETH goes to 4K and above, suddenly ZK Sync and all the others look definitely more interesting than they looked in that sideways period. But I've also starting to see now a few, not a lot, but like 1-2 takes that Blast TGE was postponed because of market conditions, because Pac-Man saw this coming, which I think is pretty absurd, because that's definitely not the case in my opinion.
And even then, wouldn't it be better to launch today or tomorrow if he saw it coming?
Yeah, that would exactly be the answer to that. So I think it's bullish. It's bullish for L2s. It's bullish for existing and upcoming ones. But I don't think it's the reason why we've seen a postponed Blast TG. That's certainly not the case.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting stuff, guys. I appreciate we have hands raised. We've got to keep it moving though. We've still got such a huge topic to speak on, especially when we have guests. It's a little bit harder to spread it around, but we'll try to get you in on the next topic if possible. We got to do the Web3 roundup to get us up to speed with everything else that's been happening in the space. Then we're going to hit the Cryptopunks issues, set it up for you. And then we've got some hot, spicy takes, unsurprisingly. From the Web3 roundup, number one, Binance reveals they will try to reshape the recent low float, high FTV trend. Obviously, people have noted that exchanges are not don't have clean hands on all this token stuff. They are very much involved in that process, and so it's going to need some reform from them. Number 2, board Elon announces launch of Edison Metaverse game for May the 23rd, and that game will last 1 week, so that is in a couple of days. Next, Gala Games loses $230 million from an exploit which allowed new minting of 5 billion tokens. That was very unfortunate in the last 24 hours. Next, UK High Court rules Craig Wright is not Satoshi. My old law firm was actually like partly involved in that back when I was still a lawyer, like 4 or 5 years ago. That was kind of interesting to see. Next, Mintify announces a 10,000 Blast Gold trading tournament between Wednesday and Friday this week. That will be fun to get some gold. Next, Dingaling publishes article on high FTV, low float tokens explaining changing centralized exchange demands. That's obviously very important, which I think was missed from our discussion the day before. And finally, Scarlett Johansson, maybe on the more creator side, Scarlett Johansson accuses Sam Altman of OpenAI of copying her voice for ChatGPT voice. Obviously, as creators, we are always looking out for what's going on in AI and that kind of arena to stay on top of what's happening there. So that is interesting to note. We're going to get into the second main headline now, which is the news on the Cryptopunks collection by Nina Chanel. This was a 500-piece collection. It was described as playful, as it is profound. I'm sharing it on screen for the people who are watching in on YouTube and on X. But if you're just listening, I wouldn't necessarily know how to describe it in words. So I'll just use the words that they said. It's a hybridized 3D sculptures that blur the lines of race and gender and reflect upon virtual versus real world identities. Kind of like stick cartoon versions of CryptoPunks. I don't want to butcher it. I don't have the vocabulary to perfectly describe this. The two main arguments before we hear from our panel itself is the one big argument was from someone like, where are we? Someone like Crypto, where are we? I can't find the tweet now. Okay, so basically one of the main arguments was this is an amazing artist, really well respected, both in Web 2, but also just amongst great institutions already. This is designed to get more eyes on the collection. There's nothing wrong with that type of collaboration. People should be celebrating that. The alternative side of the argument was that CryptoPunks should have nothing done to it. Yuga has said they will do nothing. And this is not that. It is something. It's come from the official CryptoPunks account, and that made people upset. The official response, which people might not have seen because this came after all of the initial takes from Gaga, CEO of Yuga Labs, was he said, our plan was to get Nina's latest collection into the hands of those who've been supporting her work in this space by making it available only to super cool world holders. So that's the change in plan. I think it was initially meant to be more broad. Now it's going specifically to some of Nina's collectors. The current thinking is via a randomized airdrop. So that seems to be the plans. And then they said, what about punks? Yuga will no longer touch punks. Maybe an admission that this was touching it in some way. They will just be decentralized and preserved on the blockchain. The only thing we intend to do is support a few museums and institutions in their quest to acquire a punk and help educate their audience about them. Kodama, makes sense to go to you straight away. I kind of tried my best to set up the two arguments, set up the actual art itself, and also what the response has been officially from Yuga. What's your take on the situation?
I'm gonna repeat the classic Austrian or German saying once more. Hopefully it will be adapted in every language as well, which means making an elephant out of a fly. Chris knows it. I'm sure you can't directly translate it, but who cares? In the end, it basically means you're making much more out of the small thing than it actually is.
Why do you think that?
I mean, this is first of all, the Punks in Residence project was announced, I don't know, half a year ago, and everybody was quite hyped because you invite traditional artists, you want to bridge the gap between traditional and digital art, and everybody was like cheering for it and said, yeah, it's a great idea because we want punks, our art, we want to get them into traditional collectors' hands. We want to get them into museums, so on and so forth. Then the collaboration with Nina Ebner-Chanel was announced. Everybody was hyped because she is quite a hyped contemporary artist. She embodies a lot of highly debated topics in our current times, to frame it nicely, like politically correct. She is talented. She already entered NFTs once via Goda. If you remember Goda Mint Pass, I think Pharrell and Jimmy and some shiny names were all involved. They vanished, unfortunately, as we common practice in Web3. But in the end, then suddenly the collection comes and everybody is salty. Everybody suddenly cares. Obviously, whether you like the art or not is up to you, but that's just her style. And I'm not sure if it's necessarily a punk interpretation. Maybe she took some influence from trades. But in the end, if you look at her super cool world collection, this could very well just be a 3D avatar version of her existing collection. And if you look at her general portfolio, it's more or less her style. And I also don't think you touch punks here. Obviously, yes, it's officially endorsed by Yuga. And the criticism is that bringing out the digital-only collection is not very user-friendly for traditional art collectors. There was a comment by a good friend of mine. He's from Vienna, MB, and he also said he would love to see supporting artists and then commissioning artworks, but doing sculptures, painting, installations, something that is more graspable for traditional art collectors. So I understand the criticism, but I would say leave the artist alone. If you don't have to attack someone because you don't like the art. Obviously, Yuga wanted to sell something again. You know, it's everything in Web3 is a grift. So in the end, it's somewhat. It could have been anticipated, but what really is a bit shocking to me is again that Yuga has no clue what's going on, because Garga posts 6 hours later completely. It's a bit. This is not how you run a company. You know, you don't announce something. And 5 hours later, the CEO posts and says, yeah, we fucked up, we're changing everything. The same was when they started minting Legends of Tomorrow loot on a layer 1, where basically you could have asked every random degen in our space and he would have told you never mint in-game loot on a layer 1. They stop it, complete change of decision making. Garga tweets, yeah, sorry, it was a mistake. Now the same. So the punks you don't have to stop the Punks in Residence project completely just because the first project was not taken well by crypto Twitter. I mean, the punks lead Stone, she put in so much work into this, and I mean, now you suddenly just turn the whole project off because of some feedback after 6 hours. So I'm pretty sure the whole Yuga team did not meet and talk about the strategic decision making and had like a brainstorm and analyze the situation, what went wrong. I think, you know, for me, it's like Garga just goes to Twitter, posts about it, and it's a done deal. So this is what is really shocking to me. And I would still love to have the Punks in Residency project. I like that they brought out the book. So Yuga did quite cool stuff for punks in general, and they did not touch them, you know.
Yeah, awesome takes. Thank you so much for your perspective, Kodama. I think very nuanced perspective, interesting take. Also, that maybe the broader take on Yuga itself and like the decision-making process. I think that was very insightful. I want to go to Jack to give him a chance to come in on this. I know we're drawing to a close, but Kodama, I know you might need to run now. I don't know if you.
I got 10 extra minutes.
10 extra minutes. Magic. Awesome. Jack, appreciate you waiting, my friend. We've had a lot to get into. Why don't you come in on this topic, please? We've had one perspective on the Yuga news. What's your take?
Oh, what an honor to run the show past the 1 o'clock mark in the UK just to get my take. Look, I think for me, I'm slightly more left curve than Kodama on this. Like, I do think that this was a mistake. I do think that Yuga generally have been making a lot of errors recently in terms of the, you know, at least the current market sentiment, I think they've definitely went down in a lot of holder estimations, including myself, who, you know, recently would have said I put them on a pedestal. I would not do that anymore. I think realistically it is execution risk, and that's what you want to avoid with punks. And I get that, you know, it's not a direct risk, but when you do, you know, a piece of art, or, you know, bring in an artist to do a collection and it mirrors the actual punk art and it is connected to the punk art, I think it's definitely execution risk. I think we saw the market react in that way, hence the dip. And yeah, also, you know, I do agree with Kodama on the fact that, look, it is like an immediate reaction from Yuga. And I just, yeah, I'm concerned about their ability to execute at this point. Like, I'm a big fan of Yuga, but I genuinely, I think they're making too many moves that don't really reside with me. And this is my personal opinion. I'm not saying these opinions reflect the market.
Sure. Look, I think it's a fair take. I think it's a concern, maybe going back to Kodama's point about like certain execution and maybe like quick changes in decision when things appear to other people to be clear. In fact, even if it's not clear, like if you've got conviction in something, then stand by it, you know. Maybe that's a little bit of a concern too. But unfortunately, guys, we have run to the end of the show today. Tiro, apologies, my friend, we couldn't get to you in the end. It's tough when we have 4 of us up on stage. But that is the rest. That is the whole show. We hope you enjoyed it. Thank you, as always, to my legendary co-hosts, Legendary and Sammy. Thank you to our contributors. We had Bread, Akin, Jack, and Tiro up on stage with us. And Kodama, special guest. Thanks so much for joining us, my friend. Hope you enjoyed it. How can people keep in touch with your spicy takes on all things CryptoPunks and degening?
Just on X.
On X. Absolutely love it. Guys, take care. Have a good day. We will be back here again, 7 a.m. Eastern time tomorrow. Take care. Bye-bye. Enjoy.